For the first 3 years of the hugely popular G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero toy line, the daring, highly trained Special Mission Force only had to contend with a single enemy faction: Cobra, a ruthless terrorist organisation determined to rule the world. This global conflict between good and evil remained a two-sided affair until 1985, when a new adversary stepped into the fray. The Dreadnought Motorcycle Gang are a reprehensible group of mercenaries and thieves who work for both Zartan and Cobra. Specialising in violence and destruction, the Dreadnoks have no regard for anyone but themselves and fast money, and their diet consists of little more than chocolate-covered donuts and grape soda.
Zartan and the Dreadnoks. They are nothing more than money-grubbing mercenaries.
As much as I respected the forces of Cobra as the main villains in the storyline, I really appreciate the introduction of the Dreadnoks, as they offered us a visually distinct foe for the Joes to do battle with. The original Dreadnought gang started out with only 3 members, who took orders from their leader Zartan. Yet as the Hasbro toy line expanded, more characters were added to the Dreadnought roster, along with some truly awesome vehicles. In this video, we're going to take a look at each of these vintage toys and delve into the fascinating history behind their development. Stay tuned.
Come with me, toy fans.
The Dreadnought leader Zartan is a mercenary and master of disguise, and he is recognised today as one of the most significant villains in the G.I. Joe mythology. Yet the creation of this character did not come from any story writing necessity, and was instead inspired by an innovation in plastics manufacturing. One of Hasbro's suppliers approached the company in the early 1980s with a new plastic that could change colour when exposed to ultraviolet light. So Hasbro decided to incorporate this new technology into the design of a brand new action figure. Because this exciting feature made the figure feel more premium than standard carded G.I. Joes, Hasbro chose to package the character with a small vehicle, so that it could be sold at a slightly higher price point, and this concept gave birth to Zartan and his Swamp Skier Chameleon. This action figure can be quite difficult to find complete today, due to his removable chest and thigh pads often being missing, and Zartan is armed with a laser pistol and equipped with an opening backpack, which carries his face mask disguise. This is a really neat little accessory that can be tucked into the sides of Zartan's hood to alter his identity.
Peter! It's Jesus! What?
The Swamp Skier also uses the same type of UV reactive plastic, with the main body of the vehicle changing colour from a light to dark green. The Swamp Skier can also be disassembled into several parts and stowed into a small cart that was included with the action figure. This cart, loaded with the vehicle's parts, would also act as part of a disguise, making Zartan appear like a travelling junk dealer. With the colour changing feature, Zartan's removable face disguise, and a vehicle that could be disassembled, Hasbro should be commended for packing so much play value into such a small toy, but this item wasn't without its controversy. As with all G.I. Joe characters released at the time, Zartan's file card was printed on the back of the packaging, and the original version described him as an extreme paranoid schizophrenic, with the packaging also mentioning the character's multiple personalities. This sparked a backlash from mental health experts, who stated that the action figure reinforced public misconceptions about the mentally ill, because it depicted the toy as a person who is violent in nature. Hasbro apologised for its insensitivity, changed the packaging, and made a large donation to mental health research, with the company vice president at the time calling it poor judgment.
My charity has limits!
Another notable aspect of this toy's packaging is that it does not include the Dreadnoks the Enemy logo, which was present on all of the first 3 carded Dreadnought figures. This is because Zartan was released in 1984, a year before the concept of the biker gang was introduced to the line. The original trio of Dreadnoks included Buzzer, Ripper and Torch, and Hasbro designer Ron Rudat has made no secret of the fact that the Dreadnoks were heavily inspired by the characters that appeared in the Mad Max films.
I'm gravely disappointed.
According to Buzzer's file card, he is an English-born, extreme left-wing sociology don, who went to Australia to study the biker gang phenomenon, only to be transformed into the very object of his research. And he has the hilarious real name of Dick Blinkin. Buzzer also has the most frequently revised file card of the entire G.I. Joe line, with the original version referencing his repressed psychotic anger, which was quickly altered with the use of a sticker overlay to remove this reference. This was likely a preemptive move by Hasbro to avoid a repeat of the Zartan file card controversy. Buzzer is armed with a diamond-toothed chainsaw and a silver nunchucker axe, and he carries a gas can backpack. The neat thing about this item is that the gas can can be removed from the backpack frame, affording you a nice little diorama accessory. Buzzer wears his blonde hair in a ponytail, and he is dressed in a ripped-up combat shirt that looks somewhat similar to the one worn by First Sergeant Duke, and it is adorned with military badges and dog tags that hang from his left breast pocket.
Say your prayers, Yank.
Now I'll lay you down to sleep.
The Mohawk sporting Ripper character is from Tasmania, Australia, and he is my favourite action figure from the original trio of Dreadnoks. Ripper carries an assault rifle that is adorned with a large can opener style blade, and he is equipped with a set of hydraulic jaws that are connected to its power pack via a black rubber hose. Rounding out this core grouping of Dreadnoks we have Torch, a leather-clad biker gang member from New South Wales, Australia, with a penchant for oxyacetylene cutters. The fact that all three of the original Dreadnoks are either Australian by birth or linked to the land down under via their backstory is no accident, with this also being a nod to the influence of Mad Max.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Yet the Torch action figure not only eluded me in childhood, he avoided the playtime battles of all English children, because this character was not released in the UK. When Hasbro introduced their G.I. Joe toy range to the British market in 1987, they rebranded the line as Action Force International Heroes, and Buzzer and Ripper were the only two Dreadnoks to be featured in the first wave of figures. This also explains why they were the only two Dreadnoks to appear in their UK comic debut in Action Force Weekly issue number 5. If things had remained this way, I likely wouldn't have learned about the character of Torch until later in life. But I did find out who he was in 1987, and I desperately wanted this action figure, long before I ever even realised that Action Force International Heroes was a UK rebranding of America's G.I. Joe. This is because the Action Force Weekly comics featured both original Marvel UK stories as well as reprinted American comic strips. So while Torch did not appear in the issue 5 storyline, he was featured on that issue's centerfold cross-sell, before making his story debut in Action Force Weekly issue 9, which is also notable for having some excellent Zartan cover art. Compounding my frustration at the lack of a Torch action figure was the fact that he appeared prominently on the box art of the big gift that I received from my parents for Christmas 1987. So now that I have finally acquired him some 37 years later, I decided to break out my vintage Cobra Hydrofoil and recreate the box art using the actual toys.
Oh, look at what the cat dragged in!
Torch wasn't the only glaring omission from the toy range, with the absence of motorcycles for the Dreadnoks to ride being one of the biggest misses of the whole line. You could have these characters steal the Joe's rapid fire motorcycle, but it just doesn't look right, as they should be riding Harley Davidson style bikes. Fortunately today it's easy to acquire nice 1/18 scale Harleys fairly cheaply, and the Dreadnoks look excellent when displayed with these miniature motorcycles. In both the G.I. Joe comics and the Sunbow animated series, the Dreadnok's secret hideout is located in the Florida Everglades, and another vehicle that was often used here was the Cobra Water Moccasin. So it would have been cool if this craft had been assigned to the Dreadnoks, yet it was also released in '84 alongside Zartan and the Swamp Skier, a year before the motorcycle gang appeared in the toy line. But there is evidence to suggest that Hasbro did originally intend to introduce the Dreadnoks in 1984. That's because the exciting new play feature incorporated into the 1985 G.I. Joe action figures was a newly designed ball joint at the neck, so that figures could look up and down. But the first three Dreadnoks were only able to look left and right, which was the articulation style used on all the figures released during the preceding years. 1986 would be a bonza year for the Dreadnoks, with the introduction of 4 new action figures and several vehicles. Let's kick things off with Monkey Wrench, a Welsh member of the Dreadnoks who is armed with a harpoon gun that sports a 3-pronged trident-style spear, and with his ginger hair and mirrored sunglasses, this figure always reminded me of Chuck Norris's appearance in the 1978 action film, Good Guys Wear Black.
You can call me Monkey Wrench. Me hobbies are heavy metal, unprovoked mayhem, and explosions.
Next we have Xandar and Zarana, the brother and sister of Zartan, and just like their older sibling, both of these action figures were produced with colour-changing plastic. Their character designs are more outlandish than earlier Dreadnoks, with Hasbro opting to dress them in pink and blue clothing, and by giving Xandar a shock of bright orange hair. Xandar comes with an arrow-firing sniper rifle and a quiver, while Zarana is equipped with a backpack and armed with a spur-bladed cutting weapon, and this female character has one of the more notable figure variations in the entire line. The first release of the Zarana action figure featured gold earrings, yet early on in the production run, Hasbro changed the figure's head to a newer version that did not have earrings, and the first issue figure is the more difficult of the two to acquire. They also significantly changed her face sculpt and hairstyle, but I'm unsure why Hasbro made this change, as I find the first release figure to look far better than the revised edition. Of the two general release Dreadnought vehicles released in 1986, one of them is pretty lame, but the other is thunderous. The Dreadnought Swampfire was the second vehicle in the range to feature colour-changing plastic parts, and this helicopter can float on water thanks to the inclusion of a pair of retractable pontoons. In my opinion, however, this single-seater craft is a pretty boring toy that just doesn't fit in well with the Dreadnought's concept. The same can't be said, though, of the Thunder Machine. With this toy, Hasbro's Ron Rudat proudly put his Mad Max inspiration on full display by creating a vehicle design that looked as though it was ripped directly from the 1981 action movie, The Road Warrior.
You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
The Dreadnought Thunder Machine is adorned with removable armour panels, and it features real rubber tyres, a jet power engine mounted at the rear, and a lowered front end, which looks like it was taken from a scrap Trans Am. A pair of Gatling cannons are mounted at the front, and these include a rubber ammunition belt that was designed to be fed through the guns when the barrels are rotated, but this play feature doesn't really work very well. Interestingly, a Cobra logo sticker is applied to the armoured windshield, when it would have made much more sense if Hasbro had used the Dreadnought logo, but that insignia wouldn't appear in the toy line until the following year. The Mad Max Pursuit Special Interceptor is one of the most iconic movie cars of all time, so you'd think with Hasbro being so heavily inspired by these classic Australian films, it would have been a slam dunk to create a toy that looked just like the Interceptor. But they didn't. This is because the Pursuit Special is the movie's hero car, and with the Dreadnoughts being the bad guys, Ron Rudat was wise to make the Thunder Machine appear more like the villain vehicles, with inspiration drawn from the cars driven by Lord Humongous and his psychotic gang of marauders. While I was annoyed at the dearth of motorcycles for the Dreadnoughts to ride, the Thunder Machine almost wiped away my disappointment, with its amazing post-apocalyptic design. The Thunder Machine also afforded us the fourth Dreadnought to be released in 1986.
There is only one applicant suitable for the position of new Dreadnought, and that is me, Thrasher.
Thrasher is another nicely designed Dreadnought action figure, who has a couple of lime green stripes dyed into his hair, and he wears spiked armour on his boots and shoulder pads. He also wears a catcher's mitt on his left hand, and he carries a lacrosse stick, which is one of the weirder accessory choices in the G.I. Joe line. Rounding out the 1986 Dreadnought toy collection are a couple of Sears exclusive vehicle sets. The Dreadnought Air Assault included variations of two pre-existing vehicles, the Cobra Fang and the G.I. Joe Skyhawk, and these were moulded in different coloured plastics. They also feature some colour-changing parts, like the Swamp Skier and Swampfire that came before them. Similarly, the Dreadnought Ground Assault featured colour variations of the G.I. Joe Ram and the Cobra Stinger, and all four of these vehicles are very hard to come by today. In fact, they are so rare that they command extortionate prices on the secondary market. So unless you're a Dreadnought diehard, it's understandable why you would skip these additions to your collection. In 1987 we were introduced to Zanzibar with the air skiff and the Dreadnought Cycle. Zanzibar is a Dreadnought pirate who is armed with a pistol, a hammer and a spear, and he is notable for being the first G.I. Joe action figure to have lifelike hair rooted into his head sculpt. Zanzibar also came packaged with a small air skiff vehicle, and this craft maintained the Dreadnought theme of vehicles that could be used in the swampy environment of the Florida Everglades. The single-seater air skiff is a simple toy that comes with a pair of missiles and a spinning fan that is mounted at the rear, and this was clearly inspired by the airboats that Floridians used to navigate the wetlands. The Dreadnought air skiff also has weapon attachment points incorporated into the hull, where Zanzibar can stow his hammer and spear, and I really appreciate toys that have well thought out neat little features like this.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages. This is it, the Dreadnought Cycle.
Watch out, Joe, cause trouble awaits you. The Dreadnought Cycle's gonna devastate you.
The Dreadnought Cycle has a swivel machine gun that carries 4 Dreadnoughts, and here's Zanzibar, the Dreadnought Pirate, meanest Dreadnought yet.
You can't escape me, Airskiff. Hope I didn't dirty a nice uniform, matey. Ha ha ha.
Cobra! Joe!
G.I. Joe!
Live the adventure of G.I. Joe. Dreadnought Airskiff comes with Zanzibar, Dreadnought Cycle, and other figures sold separately.
Yo, Joe!
Now, back to G.I. Joe.
The Dreadnought Cycle is memorable to me for being the toy that finally made me realise that the Action Force toys that I played with in the UK had originally been American G.I. Joe toys. When my family emigrated from England to Australia in 1988, I was 11 years old, and because we were flying with Singapore Airlines, my parents decided to stop over in Singapore along the journey. While we were there, my father took me to an enormous Toys R Us store on Orchard Road, where I discovered a huge wall of what looked like Action Force toys, but they were all adorned with the iconic G.I. Joe logo. Suddenly everything made sense, and I can clearly remember my youthful mind rapidly making all these connections in my head. I immediately began to understand why the Stalker character that appeared in issue number 1 of Action Force Weekly could never be found in English toy shops. My confusion as to why Action Force VHS tapes had sections with terrible overdubbing started to become clear.
The Force have gotten careless and sloppy. Why don't you stick around and train them?
Why? You've already got the best men available. No, I want you to stay and whip them into shape.
And in that moment, I finally accepted the reason why I never saw a Torch action figure in the UK. It was a moment of revelation for this young man, and I am not exaggerating the significance of this occasion. It was a pivotal moment in my life, and one that definitely sparked my lifelong passion for studying the history behind the toys of my childhood. During that visit to Toys R Us Singapore, my dad bought me the Dreadnought Cycle and the Xandar action figure, and I spent the next few days playing with these toys around the edge of our hotel's rooftop swimming pool. This 2-seater tricycle was a lot of fun for an 11-year-old boy, and I loved the addition of the Dreadnought logo on the back of the rotating turret, with this being its first appearance in the toy line. But the side-mounted deflector shields fell off easily, and one of them got left behind in Singapore when we flew out a few days later. Hasbro dialed back the Dreadnought entries in 1988 by only introducing one new character and a single accessory. But oh man, what a cool character it was. The Dreadnought Road Pig action figure is tall and imposing, and once again, Ron Rudat's love of the Mad Max universe is on full display, with a design that is clearly inspired by the character of Wes, who was played by Australian actor Vernon Wells in the 1981 movie Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior. While Road Pig's head sculpt doesn't look anything like Wes, he does wear very similar shoulder armour, and he is also armed with a wrist-mounted crossbow. Road Pig even carries his spare bolts on his right thigh, just like Vernon Wells does in the film.
You can run, but you can't hide!
In addition to his crossbow and shoulder armour, Road Pig also carries a spiked battle shield and a cinder block hammer. The single accessory introduced in 1988 was the Dreadnought Battle Axe, and this motorised backpack came with a large axe that could be stowed on the side of the pack. Alternatively, the battle axe could be inserted into the handle holder at the top, where a wind-up motor could activate the axe's chopping function, allowing the Dreadnoughts to hack through G.I. Joe's barbed wire defences. The final new Dreadnought character to be introduced into the vintage toy line arrived in 1989. Naugahyde is a Dreadnought poacher who came loaded down with a ton of weapons and equipment. This mustachioed villain wears an animal fur vest and a removable bush hat, and he is armed with a sniper rifle with bipod, a wrist-mounted machete, and a knife that can be carried in a sheath that is permanently sculpted into the figure's lower leg. Naugahyde is also accessorised with a hunting bow and quiver, and he is the only Dreadnought to ever come with an animal companion, in the form of a wild boar.
Well, you see, Joey, you ain't the only one what can sniff out his prey.
Before Hasbro's G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero toy line ended in the mid-1990s, we would receive variants of two key Dreadnought characters. The first is the Sonic Fighter version of Road Pig, who is decorated with so much fluoro green and orange that he looks more like an extra in a Joel Schumacher Batman movie than a Dreadnought. This action figure came with a ridiculously oversized backpack that featured battery-powered lights and sounds. And unless you're a Dreadnought completist, you're better off leaving this figure behind. Lastly, we have the Ninja Force version of Zartan that was released in 1993. This figure came with a huge assortment of ninja weapons, but they changed the look of this iconic character to include a bright orange mohawk, and I'm really not a fan of the zany figure designs that Hasbro was pumping into the G.I. Joe line in the 1990s. Despite a few missteps at the end of the run, the Dreadnoks make for a visually exciting selection of action figures that are really fun to display. And given the heavy Australian Mad Max influence, it's a collection of toys that I've wanted to complete for a very long time. Where the Cobra Legions echo the cool uniformity of the Imperial forces in Star Wars, the Dreadnoks are more reminiscent of the bounty hunters from The Empire Strikes Back, with each character having a unique, badass look. Just don't let them sing.
We're Cold Slither, you'll be joining us soon. Cat! It's all wrong. This is art, not exploitation.
And so began the Dreadnok journey north, to their place in the swamp. Among them, they found a new leader, the man who came from colour-changing plastic, the Zartan. And just as Ron Rudat had planned, they travelled far beyond the reach of 80s toy stores. The figures, the precious figures, were hidden in the vehicles. As for me, I grew to manhood in the fullness of time. I became the collector, the chief of the Analog Toys tribe. And the Sonic Fighter Road Pig, that was the last we ever saw of him. He lives now only in the trash can of history. So thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, you can click the links over here to check out some of our other vintage G.I. Joe retrospectives. Or subscribe to the channel by clicking here, or consider supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get access to hours of exclusive content. I'm Tony from Analog Toys, and Yo Joe.